The dust cloud rising from the cattle stampede had barely settled when Emma Hartley realized her father was never coming back from the canyon, and she would have to run the ranch alone, with nothing but her calloused hands and stubborn will to keep her from losing everything her family had built in the harsh Wyoming Territory of 1878. She stood on the porch of the weathered ranch house, watching the last rays of September sunlight paint the mountains gold and crimson, her fingers gripping the wooden railing so tight her knuckles went white. 22 years old, and suddenly the weight of 200 acres, 40 head of cattle, and a mortgage to the bank in Cheyenne rested squarely on her shoulders. Her father, Thomas Hartley, had been a good man, a strong man, but even strong men couldn't survive a fall from a cliff face while trying to retrieve a lost calf. The funeral had been 3 days ago, and the sympathetic looks from the townspeople of Timber Ridge had already started to fade into something else. Doubt, pity, expectation that she would fail. Emma looked down at her hands in the fading light. They were rough, scarred from years of working alongside her father. Her mother had died when she was 12, and there had been no one else to teach her the gentle arts that other young women learned. Instead, she had learned to mend fences, break horses, brand cattle, and shoot straight. Her palms were calloused from rope and reins, her fingers stained from saddle oil and hard work. These were not the soft, delicate hands of a proper lady. These were the hands of someone who had fought for survival every single day. She heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching and straightened her spine, brushing a strand of dark brown hair from her face. She had no time for visitors, no time for more condolences or thinly veiled offers to buy her land at a fraction of its worth. But when the rider came into view, she realized this was no neighbor coming to pay respects. The man sat tall in his saddle, his broad-brimmed hat pulled low against the setting sun. He rode a paint horse that looked trail-worn but well cared for, and as he drew closer, Emma could make out the details of his face: strong jaw, dark stubble, eyes the color of storm clouds that seemed to take in everything at once. He was young, maybe 26 or 27, with the lean, muscular build of someone who lived in the saddle. His clothes were dusty from travel, and a bedroll was tied behind his saddle, along with saddlebags that had seen better days. He reined in his horse a respectful distance from the porch and touched the brim of his hat. His voice, when he spoke, was deep and carried a hint of Texas drawl. "Evening, miss. Name is Cole Brennan. I heard in town you might be looking for a ranch hand." Emma studied him carefully, her instincts telling her to be cautious. A stranger showing up just when she needed help, most could be providence or could be trouble. "Who told you that?" "Bartender at the Silver Dollar. Said Thomas Hartley's daughter might need someone now that—" He paused, his expression softening slightly. "Now that she's running the place alone. I am sorry for your loss, miss." There was something genuine in his voice that made Emma's defensive walls lower, just a fraction. "I appreciate that, but I do not know you, Mr. Brennan, and I'm not in the habit of hiring drifters who ride in off the range." Cole nodded slowly, as if he had expected this response. "That is fair. I can tell you I have been working ranches since I was 14 years old. Grew up in Texas, worked my way through Colorado, and I know cattle, horses, and everything in between. I am good with my hands. I do not drink to excess, and I keep my word." He met her eyes directly. "I can also tell you that I am not looking to take advantage of anyone. You need help, and I need honest work. That is all I am offering." Emma considered this. She did need help, desperately. The ranch work was too much for one person, and she had already been running herself ragged trying to keep up with everything. But trusting a stranger was a risk she wasn't sure she could afford. "You have references?" "I have a letter from my last employer in Colorado, ranch owner named Robert McKenzie. He will vouch for my character and my work." Cole reached slowly into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, extending it toward her. Emma descended the porch steps and took the letter, unfolding it carefully. In the dying light, she could make out the words praising Cole Brennan's work ethic, honesty, and skill with livestock. The letter looked genuine, complete with an official-looking seal at the bottom. She folded it back up and met Cole's steady gaze. "Why did you leave Colorado?" "Wanted to see more country before I settled down somewhere permanent." Mackenzie understood. He knew I had the wanderlust in me, needed to work it out of my system. Cole shifted in his saddle, and Emma could see the weariness in his posture. He had been riding for a long time. but I am ready to stay in one place for a while, if the work is good and the pay is fair. Emma made a decision that was part desperation and part intuition. I can offer you $30 a month, room in the bunkhouse, and 3 meals a day. Work starts at dawn and ends when the work is done. I expect honesty, hard work, and respect. If you steal from me, lie to me, or give me cause to regret this, I will not hesitate to send you packing. Do we have an understanding? Cole's face broke into a slight smile, the first real expression she had seen from him. Yes, ma'am. We have an understanding. He dismounted smoothly and extended his hand. You will not regret this. Emma hesitated for just a moment before taking his hand. His grip was firm and warm, his palm as calloused as her own. For some reason, that small detail made her feel slightly better about her decision. The bunkhouse is over there, she said, pointing to a small building near the barn. Get yourself settled in. Supper will be ready in an hour. I hope you like stew because that is what we are having. Stew sounds perfect, Miss Hartley. Cole gathered his horse's reins and started toward the barn. It is just Emma, she called after him. Miss Hartley makes me feel like a school teacher. He glanced back with that same slight smile. Emma it is then, and I go by Cole. As she watched him lead his horse away, Emma felt a strange flutter in her chest that she firmly ignored. She had no time for such foolishness. She had hired a ranch hand, nothing more. The fact that he was handsome and had kind eyes was completely irrelevant to the work that needed to be done. She returned to the house and focused on finishing the evening meal, trying not to think about the stranger who would now be sharing her land and her daily life. But as she stirred the pot of stew, she found her thoughts drifting back to the moment their hands had touched, and she had to remind herself sternly that she was a practical woman with a ranch to run, not some silly girl prone to romantic notions. The next morning came cold and early, with frost painting the grass silver and the sky turning from black to deep blue to pale gold. Emma was already up and dressed, pulling on her worn boots and heavy work coat, when she heard movement outside. Through the kitchen window, she could see Cole emerging from the bunkhouse, looking alert despite the early hour. He moved with purpose toward the barn, and she found herself watching the easy way he carried himself, comfortable in his own skin and his place in the world. She shook her head and turned her attention to starting the coffee and frying bacon and eggs. When she rang the bell outside the kitchen door, Cole appeared within minutes, hat in hand, and his face freshly washed at the pump. Morning, he said, his voice still rough with sleep, but his expression awake and ready. Morning, breakfast is on the table. Emma gestured toward the modest kitchen table where she had set 2 places. It felt strange to be sharing a meal with someone again, after 3 days of eating alone, but she pushed the feeling aside and sat down across from him. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Emma laid out the day's work. We have fencing that needs mending on the north pasture. Some of the cattle have been getting through to the creek beyond our property line, and I do not need trouble with the neighbors. After that, there is hay that needs to be brought down from the upper field before the weather turns. Cole nodded, sopping up egg yolk with a piece of bread. I will start with the fence. You have the materials I will need? Wire and posts in the barn. Tools are there too. Emma paused, then added, I will be working on the fence with you. 2 people will get it done faster. She saw something flicker across Cole's face, but couldn't quite read it. You do not need to do that. I can handle it. This is my ranch, and I do not sit idle while there is work to be done. Emma's voice was firm, but not unkind. I have been mending fences since I was tall enough to hold a hammer. I am not going to stop now. Cole raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, and she noticed again how capable those hands looked, strong and work-hardened. I did not mean any offense, just thought you might have other things that need your attention. Everything needs my attention, Emma admitted with a wry smile. But the fence is the priority today. The account books can wait until evening. They finished breakfast and headed out together as the sun climbed higher, burning off the frost and warming the air to something almost pleasant. Emma led the way to the barn, where they gathered the supplies they would need, loading them into a small wagon hitched to one of the draft horses. Cole worked efficiently, clearly knowing exactly what he was doing, and Emma felt some of her lingering doubts ease. At least he seemed to be as competent as his reference letter suggested. The ride out to the north pasture took 20 minutes, and during that time, Cole asked questions about the ranch, the cattle, and the land itself. His questions were intelligent and showed genuine interest, not just polite conversation. Emma found herself relaxing slightly, talking more freely than she had expected to with a near stranger. "How long has your family owned this land?" Cole asked as they approached the damaged section of fence. "My father homesteaded it 17 years ago. It was rough country then, rougher than now. He built everything from nothing." Emma felt the familiar ache in her chest when she thought of her father, but she kept her voice steady. "He always said this land was worth fighting for. He was right." Cole looked out over the rolling pastures, the mountains rising in the distance, the clear creek cutting through the valley. "This is good country, hard, but good." They worked side by side through the morning, pulling out damaged posts and replacing them with new ones, stretching wire tight and securing it properly. Emma was used to physical labor, but she could feel the strain in her shoulders and back from doing too much alone over the past few days. She refused to show any weakness, though, working with the same determination she always had. Cole matched her pace, but never made her feel like she was slowing him down. He worked with a steady rhythm, not rushing but not wasting time either, and he talked as they worked, telling her stories about some of the ranches he had worked, the characters he had met, the country he had seen. His stories were funny and engaging, and Emma found herself laughing more than once, surprised at how good it felt after days of grief and worry. When the sun reached its peak, they paused to eat the lunch Emma had packed, sitting in the shade of the wagon and passing a canteen of cool water between them. Emma's hands were aching from the work, and she found herself looking at them with that familiar mixture of resignation and disappointment. They were so rough, so scarred. No amount of washing or lotion, not that she had much time for either, would ever make them soft and feminine. She must have made some sound, because Cole looked over at her. "Something wrong?" Emma quickly clasped her hands together, embarrassed to have been caught in such a moment of vanity. "No, nothing, just tired hands." But Cole's eyes were too perceptive, and he had seen where she was looking. "Hard work leaves its mark," he said quietly. "Nothing to be ashamed of in that." "I am not ashamed," Emma said quickly, then realized that wasn't entirely true. "I just sometimes wonder what it would be like to have hands that looked like they belonged to a lady instead of a ranch hand." Cole was quiet for a moment, and Emma wished she had kept her mouth shut. She did not need pity from anyone, especially not from a man she had just hired. But when Cole spoke, there was no pity in his voice, only something that sounded like respect. "Some of the strongest people I have ever known had working hands. My mother had hands like yours, rough from farming and raising 6 children. She could card wool, churn butter, plow a field, and still make the finest bread you ever tasted. I never once thought her hands were anything but beautiful, because they showed who she was and what she was capable of." Emma felt an unexpected warmth spread through her chest at his words. She met his eyes and saw only sincerity there. "Thank you for saying that. I am not just saying it." Cole held up his own hands, showing the calluses, scars, and rough skin. "We wear our lives on our hands. Nothing wrong with that." They returned to work with a new understanding between them, and Emma felt something shift in how she viewed this stranger who had ridden onto her ranch. He was more than just a hired hand. He was someone who understood the life she lived, who did not judge her for being different from other women her age. The afternoon passed quickly, and by the time they finished the fence repairs, the sun was starting its descent toward the western mountains. They loaded the tools back into the wagon and headed toward the ranch house, both tired but satisfied with a good day's work. Over the next few weeks, a routine developed. Emma and Cole worked together on the endless tasks that came with running a ranch. They mended more fences, moved cattle to better grazing, repaired the barn roof before the winter storms could cause damage, and cut and stacked firewood for the cold months ahead. Cole proved to be everything he had promised, a skilled and tireless worker who never complained and always gave his best effort. But more than that, he became someone Emma could talk to, someone who made the long days less lonely. They shared meals and conversation, and Emma found herself looking forward to these times more than she wanted to admit. Cole told her about growing up in Texas, about his large family and the small ranch his father had struggled to keep running. He talked about his decision to strike out on his own, to see the country and learn everything he could before eventually settling down somewhere. Emma shared her own stories about growing up on the Wyoming ranch, about her mother's death and how it had changed everything, about learning to be both daughter and ranch hand to her father. She told him about her dreams for the ranch, how she wanted to expand the herd and improve the bloodlines, how she hoped to make this place into something truly special. Cole listened to everything she said with genuine interest, asking questions and offering suggestions that showed he was really thinking about her goals. And gradually, Emma realized that somewhere along the way, she had started to think of Cole as more than just a hired hand. He was becoming a friend, and maybe something more. The realization hit her one evening in mid-October as they sat on the porch after supper, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Cole was telling a story about an ornery bull he had once dealt with in Colorado, his voice warm with amusement, and Emma found herself watching his face more than listening to the words. She noticed the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hands moved expressively as he talked, and she felt something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with indigestion and everything to do with the way this man made her feel seen and understood. The thought terrified her. She could not afford to develop feelings for Cole Brennan. He had made it clear he was a drifter, someone working his way through the country before settling down. He would move on eventually, and she would be left alone again, only this time it would hurt more because she would miss him. Better to keep things professional, friendly, but distant. Better to protect her heart. But even as she made this decision, she knew it was too late. Her heart had already made its own choice, regardless of what her practical mind advised. The weather turned colder as October gave way to November, and the work on the ranch shifted to winter preparations. Emma and Cole worked longer hours, trying to get everything done before the first serious snowfall. They reinforced the barn and the bunkhouse against the wind, made sure the hay stores were adequate for the livestock, and moved the cattle to the lower pastures where they would be more sheltered from winter storms. One particularly cold morning, Emma was working in the barn, trying to fix a broken stall door, when a splinter drove deep into the pad of her thumb. She let out a sharp gasp of pain and frustration, dropping the hammer and looking at her hand. Blood welled up around the splinter, and she could see it was driven in deep. Cole appeared immediately, drawn by the sound of her distress. "What happened?" "Just a splinter," Emma said through gritted teeth, trying to pull it out with her other hand. But her fingers were too stiff from the cold, and the splinter was too deep. "Damn it!" "Let me see." Cole took her hand gently in his touch careful despite his rough hands. He examined the injury closely, then looked up at her. "This is deep. We need to get it out properly or it will get infected. Come inside where there is better light." Emma wanted to protest that she could handle it herself, but the pain was sharp and constant, and she knew he was right. She let him lead her into the ranch house, where the fire and the hearth provided warmth and light. Cole sat her down at the kitchen table and went to wet a clean cloth at the pump. He returned and carefully cleaned the blood from her thumb, his movements gentle and sure. "This is going to hurt," he warned, then used his own knife, cleaned in the fire first, to carefully work the splinter free. Emma bit her lip against the pain, but did not pull away. When the splinter finally came out, Cole cleaned the wound again and wrapped it in a strip of clean bandage. "There," he said softly, still holding her hand in both of his. "You should be more careful." Emma looked down at their joined hands, his rough and scarred fingers cradling her equally work-worn hand with surprising tenderness. And suddenly, all the feelings she had been trying to suppress came flooding to the surface. She felt her eyes sting with unexpected tears, and before she could stop herself, she was speaking words she had not meant to say aloud. "My hands are too rough for a lady," she said sadly, her voice barely above a whisper. She did not pull her hand away from his, but she could not meet his eyes either. "I will never be the kind of woman men want. I am too hard, too rough around the edges. These hands will never be soft and delicate. They are ruined from work, and so am I." The words hung in the air between them, and Emma immediately regretted them. She had revealed too much, shown too much vulnerability. But before she could take it back or pull away, Cole did something completely unexpected. He lifted her injured hand to his lips and kissed it gently, his mouth warm against her rough skin. Then he kissed her other hand, with the same tenderness and reverence as if she were the finest lady in a grand ballroom instead of a ranch woman in a simple kitchen. When he finally looked up at her, his storm-gray eyes were intense and full of emotion. "They're perfect to me," he said, his voice rough with feeling. "Everything about you is perfect to me, Emma Hartley. Your hands show your strength, your courage, your determination. They show that you are a survivor, a fighter. Any man who cannot see the beauty in that is a fool." Emma felt tears spill over and run down her cheeks, but they were not tears of sadness anymore. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break free from her chest. Cole, he was still holding her hands, and he squeezed them gently. I know I am just a drifter, and I have no right to say this. I know I should keep my mouth shut and my feelings to myself. But Emma, I have been falling in love with you since the first day I rode onto this ranch. Maybe even before that, from the moment I saw you standing on that porch with the sunset behind you, looking like you could take on the whole world if you had to. Emma's breath caught in her throat. You love me? I do. Cole's expression was open and honest, hiding nothing. I love your strength, your determination, your kindness. I love the way you never give up, even when things are hard. I love your laugh, your smile, the way you look at this land like it is the most precious thing in the world. And yes, I love your hands because they are part of you, and everything about you is worth loving. For a long moment, Emma could not speak. Her mind was reeling, her heart was soaring, and she felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to either fall or fly. Finally, she found her voice. I thought you were planning to move on, to keep drifting. I was, Cole admitted, but that was before I met you, before I found something worth staying for. Emma, if you will have me, I want to stay here. I want to help you build this ranch into everything you dream it can be. I want to stand beside you through whatever comes, good or bad. I want to wake up every morning and see your face. I want to spend every day earning the right to hold your hand. Emma felt a smile break across her face, bright and genuine despite her tears. You really mean that? Every word. Cole reached up and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks with his thumbs, his touch infinitely careful. I love you, Emma, and I am asking if you might ever feel the same way about me. Emma laughed, a sound of pure joy. I already do, you foolish man. I have been trying not to fall in love with you for weeks now, but it did not work. I love you, Cole Brennan. I love your kindness, your strength, your sense of humor. I love the way you treat me like an equal, never trying to diminish me or change me. I love the way you understand this life, this land. I love everything about you. Cole's face lit up with a smile that transformed him from handsome to breathtaking. You mean it? Every word, Emma echoed his own phrase back to him, and then she was in his arms, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that was both gentle and passionate, tentative and sure. It was a first kiss and a promise all at once, and Emma felt like her heart might burst from the sheer joy of it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, Emma. Be my wife, my partner, my everything. Let me spend the rest of my life loving you and helping you make this ranch the best in Wyoming Territory. Emma pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. Are you sure this is what you want? Ranch life is hard, especially here. The winters are brutal, the work never ends, and there are no guarantees we will ever be more than comfortable. I have never been more sure of anything in my life. Cole's expression was absolutely serious now. I am not asking for an easy life, Emma. I am asking for a life with you. That is all I need. Emma felt fresh tears spring to her eyes, but she was smiling so wide, her face hurt. Then yes, I will marry you, Cole Brennan. Nothing would make me happier. They sealed the promise with another kiss, and then another, and Emma felt like she was floating. She had spent so long being alone, being strong, being the one who never needed anyone. But Cole was not asking her to need him or to be weak. He was offering to stand beside her, to be her partner in every sense of the word. It was everything she had not dared to dream of. They spent the rest of the day working side by side as always, but everything felt different now. There was a lightness to the work, a joy that had not been there before. They caught each other's eyes and smiled like teenagers with their first crush. They found excuses to touch each other in passing, a hand on the shoulder, fingers brushing as they passed tools back and forth. And when evening came and they sat down to supper, it was not as employer and hired hand, or even as friends, but as two people deeply in love and planning a future together. Over the next few days, they made plans. They decided to have a small wedding in Timber Ridge as soon as arrangements could be made. Emma had no family left to invite, and Cole's family was far away in Texas. But they did not need a big celebration. They just needed each other and a few witnesses to make it official. Emma rode into town to speak with Reverend Matthews about performing the ceremony, while Cole stayed behind to manage the ranch work. The Reverend was surprised but pleased, and he agreed to marry them the following Saturday. Emma also stopped by the general store, where Mrs. Patterson, the owner's wife, helped her pick out fabric for a new dress. It would not be a fancy wedding gown, just a simple dress in a deep blue that brought out the color of Emma's eyes, but it would be new and special, and that was enough. When she returned to the ranch that evening, she found Cole had spent the day not just on chores, but also cleaning and organizing the bunkhouse. He showed her the small improvements he had made, looking almost shy. "I thought, after we are married, we might want to fix up the main house a bit," he said. "Make it feel more like ours together, instead of just your father's place." But I did not want to presume. Emma felt a rush of love for this man, who was so careful of her feelings, so respectful of her past, while building toward their future. "I think that is a wonderful idea. This will be our home, our ranch. We should make it reflect both of us." Cole smiled and pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "Our home. I like the sound of that." The week passed in a blur of activity. They finished the most pressing ranch work and made sure everything was secure enough to leave for a day. Emma worked on her dress in the evenings, her stitches careful despite her rough hands. Cole cleaned his best clothes and even bought a new shirt and string tie from the general store when he rode into town for supplies. Saturday arrived clear and cold, with a dusting of fresh snow on the ground that made everything look clean and new. Emma woke before dawn, too excited and nervous to sleep. She bathed carefully and washed her hair, then spent time brushing it until it shone. She had always worn it in a simple braid for work, but today she left it down, falling in dark waves past her shoulders. When she put on her new blue dress, she barely recognized herself in the small mirror. She looked like a different person, softer and more feminine than the ranch woman in worn work clothes. But when she looked at her hands, still rough and calloused despite her scrubbing, she felt a moment of doubt. Would Cole see her differently in this dress? Would he wonder what he was doing, marrying a woman who would never be a delicate lady? A knock on her bedroom door interrupted her thoughts. "Emma, are you ready? We should head into town soon if we are going to make it on time." Emma took a deep breath and opened the door. Cole stood in the hallway, dressed in clean black trousers, a crisp white shirt, and a dark vest. His hair was still damp from washing, and he had shaved the stubble from his face. He looked impossibly handsome, and when he saw her, his expression transformed into something that made Emma's breath catch. "Emma," he breathed, "you look beautiful, absolutely beautiful." She felt her cheeks heat with a blush. "Thank you. You look very handsome yourself." Cole reached for her hand, the rough one with the bandaged thumb, and brought it to his lips for a gentle kiss, just as he had done days before. "You are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen, and I am the luckiest man alive." Emma felt her doubts melt away. This man loved her, not despite who she was, but because of it. That was worth more than any amount of soft hands or delicate manners. They rode into Timber Ridge together in the wagon, sitting close on the bench seat, Cole's hand finding hers whenever he did not need both hands for the reins. The town was quiet on this cold Saturday morning, with only a few people out and about. They went directly to the small white church at the edge of town, where Reverend Matthews was waiting for them. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. The only witnesses were the Reverend's wife and Mr. and Mrs. Patterson from the general store, who had kindly agreed to attend. Emma and Cole stood before the Reverend and exchanged vows that were traditional but felt newly meaningful when spoken with such deep sincerity. When Cole slipped a simple gold band onto Emma's finger, his hands were shaking slightly, and she loved him all the more for his nervousness. When it was her turn to place a matching band on his finger, she felt tears prick her eyes at the significance of this moment. They were binding their lives together, promising to face whatever came as partners. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Matthews said with a warm smile. "Cole, you may kiss your bride." Cole cupped Emma's face in his rough, gentle hands and kissed her softly, a kiss full of love and promise. The small group of witnesses applauded, and Emma felt joy bubble up inside her like a spring. She was married. She was Cole's wife, and he was her husband, and nothing had ever felt more right. They celebrated with a simple meal at the town's small restaurant, the Pattersons joining them and sharing stories and laughter. It was not a grand wedding breakfast, but it was perfect in its simplicity and genuine warmth. When they finally headed back to the ranch in the afternoon, Emma felt like she was floating. The ride home was quiet, both of them content just to be together. When they arrived back at the ranch, Cole helped Emma down from the wagon with courtly manners that made her smile. Then, before she could head toward the house, he swept her up into his arms. "Cole, Emma laughed, startled. "What are you doing?" "Carrying my bride over the threshold," he said with a grin. "It is tradition." "We have already been living here," Emma pointed out, but she wrapped her arms around his neck and let him carry her into the house. Cole carried her through the door and into the main room, where he finally set her down gently. But he did not let her go, keeping his arms around her waist and looking down at her with an expression of such love and wonder that Emma felt her breath catch. "Hello, Mrs. Brennan," he said softly. "Hello, Mr. Brennan," Emma replied, and then they were kissing again, with more passion now that they were alone and married, now that there was nothing holding them back. That night, they became husband and wife in every sense, and Emma discovered a tenderness and passion she had never imagined. Cole was gentle and patient, treating her like she was precious and perfect, and Emma felt cherished in a way she had never experienced before. When they finally fell asleep, wrapped in each other's arms, Emma felt a peace and contentment that went bone deep. She was home, not just in the house she had grown up in, but in Cole's embrace, in the life they were building together. The winter that followed was harsh, as Wyoming winters always were, but Emma and Cole faced it together. They worked side by side to keep the cattle fed and safe, to maintain the buildings against the brutal cold and snow, to keep the fires burning and the food stores adequate. There were days when the work was backbreaking and the cold was bitter, but there were also long evenings by the fire, talking and laughing and making plans for the future. Cole proved to be not just a skilled ranch hand, but an astute manager. He had ideas for improving the ranch's efficiency, for breeding better cattle, for managing resources more effectively. Emma listened to his suggestions and shared her own ideas, and together they developed a vision for what the Hartley Ranch, now the Brennan Ranch in all but official name, could become. Christmas came, and although they had little money for extravagances, they made it special. Emma baked bread and pies, and Cole surprised her with a beautiful leather-bound journal he had ordered from the catalog, insisting that she should write down her ideas and plans for the ranch. Emma gave him a new saddle blanket she had woven herself during the long winter evenings, the pattern intricate and the colors rich. But the best gift was simply being together, celebrating their first Christmas as husband and wife in the warm ranch house while snow fell softly outside. As winter gave way to spring, Emma began to suspect she might be carrying a child. She waited to be sure before telling Cole, not wanting to build up his hopes if she was wrong. But when she was certain, she chose a perfect evening to share the news. They were sitting on the porch after supper, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink, when Emma reached for Cole's hand. "I have something to tell you," she said, unable to keep the smile from her face. Cole turned to her, reading the happiness in her expression. "What is it?" "We are going to have a baby, sometime in early autumn, I think." For a moment, Cole just stared at her, and Emma wondered if he was shocked or worried. But then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen, and he let out a whoop of joy that startled the birds from the nearby trees. He pulled her into his arms, careful not to hold her too tight, and kissed her soundly. "We are going to have a baby," he repeated, as if testing the words. "Emma, this is wonderful. This is the best news I have ever heard." Emma laughed, relieved and delighted by his reaction. "You are happy then?" "Happy? I am overjoyed. I am thrilled. I am the luckiest man who ever lived." Cole pulled back just enough to place his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "A baby. Our baby." Over the next few months, Cole became almost comically protective. He insisted Emma not do any heavy lifting, worried when she worked too long in the sun, and generally fussed over her like a mother hen. Emma found it both endearing and slightly exasperating, as she felt perfectly fine and capable of doing most of her usual work. But she understood it came from love, so she tolerated his concern with good humor, and only occasionally told him he was being ridiculous. As her belly grew round with their child, Emma found herself marveling at the changes in her body and her life. A year ago, she had been alone and grieving, convinced she would spend her life as a solitary ranchwoman with rough hands and no prospects for love. Now, she was married to a wonderful man and expecting their first child, and the ranch was thriving under their joint efforts. Autumn arrived with its stunning display of gold and crimson, and Emma's time drew near. Cole had already ridden into town to fetch Dr. Harrison, who agreed to come stay at the ranch for a few days before the expected birth, to ensure he would be there when the time came. The labor began on a cool September evening, almost exactly a year after Cole had first ridden onto the ranch. Emma was calm through the early stages, but as the pain intensified, she found herself gripping Cole's hand with a strength born of desperation. He stayed with her throughout, ignoring Dr. Harrison's suggestion that he wait outside as most men did. Cole refused to leave Emma's side, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, whispering encouragement and love. When their son finally entered the world with a strong, healthy cry, Emma was exhausted but exhilarated. Dr. Harrison placed the baby in her arms, and she looked down at the tiny, perfect face with wonder. He had Cole's strong features and a surprising amount of dark hair. He was beautiful. Cole, with tears streaming down his face, leaned over to look at their son. "He is perfect," he whispered, "just like his mother." "What should we name him?" Emma asked, looking up at her husband with tired but happy eyes. Cole thought for a moment, then said softly, "What about Thomas, after your father?" Emma felt her own tears spill over at the thoughtfulness of the suggestion. "Thomas Cole Brennan," she said, testing the name. "I love it, thank you." They spent the rest of the night in a haze of exhausted joy, taking turns holding their son, marveling at his tiny fingers and toes, watching him sleep with the fierce protectiveness of new parents. Dr. Harrison stayed overnight to ensure both Emma and the baby were doing well, and by morning he pronounced them both healthy and strong. The next few months passed in a blur of sleepless nights and overwhelming love. Thomas was a good baby, generally content and healthy, but he still required constant attention. Emma and Cole learned the rhythms of parenthood together, sharing the duties and the joys. Cole proved to be a natural father, patient and gentle with their son, singing to him in a surprisingly good voice and walking him around the house when he was fussy. The ranch work continued, of course, but they adjusted to include the baby. Emma would often bring Thomas out with her, keeping him in a basket in the shade while she worked nearby. Cole built a cradle that could be moved from room to room, ensuring their son was always close. They were exhausted most of the time, but they were happy. As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to thrive. Word had spread about the quality of the Brennan cattle, and they were able to sell their stock at good prices. Emma and Cole reinvested the profits into the ranch, buying more land, expanding the herd, and making improvements to the buildings and fences. What had once been a struggling homestead was becoming a successful operation. When Thomas was 2 years old, Emma discovered she was expecting again. This time, there was less nervousness and more excitement. They knew what to expect now, and they were ready to expand their family. Their daughter, whom they named Rosemarie after both of their mothers, arrived in the spring, a tiny and delicate baby, who nonetheless had a remarkably strong will for someone so small. Cole was utterly charmed by his daughter, and Emma teased him that Rose had her father completely wrapped around her tiny finger. Thomas, for his part, was initially unsure about this new addition to the family, but soon became a protective and loving big brother. Life settled into a new rhythm, busier and louder than before, but full of love and laughter. The ranch house that had once echoed with loneliness now rang with the sounds of children playing, of Cole singing silly songs, of Emma's laughter. They added onto the house, building more bedrooms and expanding the kitchen. They planted a garden and fruit trees, making the ranch not just a place of work, but a true home. Years passed, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Thomas grew tall and strong, showing early signs of his father's easy way with horses and his mother's determination. Rose was a spirited child, fearless and curious, always getting into things she should not. When she was 3, Emma gave birth to another son, whom they named Samuel, and then 2 years later, another daughter, Grace. The ranch continued to prosper under Emma and Cole's management. They became well respected in the community, known for their fair dealing and the quality of their livestock. Emma served on the school board when one was finally established in Timber Ridge, while Cole helped organize a cattlemen's association to protect the interests of local ranchers. But through all the growth and change, the connection between Emma and Cole remained strong. They still made time for each other, still found moments to steal kisses in the barn or sit together on the porch after the children were in bed. They had built not just a successful ranch, but a true partnership, each respecting and valuing the other. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Cole surprised Emma by having a professional photographer come out from Cheyenne to take a family portrait. They all dressed in their best clothes and gathered on the porch of the ranch house, the mountains providing a stunning backdrop. Thomas, now 11, stood tall and serious. Rose, at 8, could barely contain her excitement. Samuel, at 5, kept trying to squirm away. And Grace, just turned 3, was more interested in the photographer's equipment than sitting still. When the photographer finally captured the image, it was not a perfect formal portrait, but something better. It showed a family, happy and real, love evident in every glance and touch. Years later, Emma would look at that photograph and remember this time as the fullness of their joy, when their children were young and the future stretched out bright and promising before them. But that evening, after the photographer had left and the children were finally asleep, Emma and Cole sat on the porch as they had so many times before. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in familiar shades of gold and crimson. Cole reached for Emma's hand, the gesture as natural as breathing after 10 years of marriage. Emma looked down at their joined hands, both rough and scarred from years of hard work, both strong and capable. "Do you remember the day I told you my hands were too rough for a lady?" Emma asked softly. Cole smiled, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing it gently, just as he had that day so long ago. "I remember, and I remember telling you they were perfect to me." "Do you still think so? After all these years of even more work and wear?" Cole turned to look at her, his gray eyes full of love and warmth. "Emma, these hands have built this ranch with me. They have brought 4 beautiful children into the world. They have healed wounds, both physical and emotional. They have held mine when I needed comfort and pushed me to be better when I needed challenge. They have created a home, a family, a life worth living." He kissed her hand again, then held it against his cheek. "They are more than perfect to me. They are everything." Emma felt tears sting her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I love you, Cole Brennan, more now than even on the day we married." "And I love you, Emma Brennan, more than words could ever express." Cole pulled her close, and they sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the land they had built their life upon. The years continued to pass, bringing new challenges and new joys. Thomas grew into a fine young man, eventually marrying a school teacher from Cheyenne and building his own house on a section of the ranch that Emma and Cole deeded to him. Rose, true to her spirited nature, shocked everyone by deciding to study medicine, eventually becoming one of the first female doctors in Wyoming Territory. Samuel followed in his father's footsteps, loving the ranch life and becoming Cole's right hand in managing the growing operation. Grace, the youngest, inherited her mother's business sense and her father's charm, eventually taking over the financial management of the ranch. Emma and Cole grew older together, their hair turning silver, their faces gaining lines from years of sun and laughter. But their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened with time, weathering storms both literal and figurative, growing stronger with each passing year. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were now grandchildren running around the yard, adding another generation to the Brennan legacy. Emma watched from the porch as Cole played with the little ones, his movements slower than they once were, but his joy undiminished. Thomas approached and sat down beside his mother, following her gaze. "You and Pa built something special here, Ma. Not just the ranch, but the family, the love. I hope I can build something half as good with my own family." Emma reached over and squeezed her son's hand. "You are already doing it, Thomas. Your father and I are so proud of you, of all of you children. You have become wonderful people, and that is the greatest success we could have asked for. Pa told me once about the day he first came here, how he knew immediately that you were someone special. He said he fell in love with you before he even knew your name, just from seeing the way you stood on this porch facing down the sunset, like you could take on anything." Emma smiled at the memory. "I was so stubborn back then, so determined not to need anyone. Thank God your father saw past that and showed me that needing someone, loving someone, is not weakness but strength. And thank God you gave him a chance, even though he was just a drifter passing through." "He was never just a drifter," Emma said softly. "From the moment he stepped onto this land, he was meant to be here. I just did not know it yet." The celebration continued late into the evening, with food and music and laughter. As the night drew to a close and the family members began to depart for their own homes, Cole found Emma in the kitchen, cleaning up the last of the dishes. "Leave those," he said, taking the dish from her hands. "Come with me. Curious, Emma let him lead her out to the porch, where he had laid out blankets and pillows, creating a comfortable nest under the stars. The night was warm for late autumn, and the sky was clear and filled with stars. "Remember when we used to sit out here and plan our future?" Cole asked as they settled into the blankets together. "When everything was still ahead of us?" "I remember," Emma said, resting her head on his shoulder. "We have done well, I think. Built the life we dreamed about." "We have done better than I ever dared dream," Cole corrected. "Emma, these 25 years with you have been the greatest gift of my life. You have made me a better man, given me a family, built an empire with me. I could not have asked for more." "We built it together," Emma insisted. "Everything we have, we made as partners." "That is why it worked," Cole agreed. "Because we were always partners, equals, right from the start." They lay together under the stars, comfortable in the silence and in each other's presence. Emma thought about the young woman she had been, standing on this porch alone and afraid, convinced that her rough hands and unconventional life meant she would never find love. She thought about the young man who had ridden onto her ranch and seen not her flaws but her strength. She thought about the life they had built together, the family they had raised, the love that had sustained them through everything. "Cole," she said softly. "Yes, my love. Thank you for kissing my rough hands that day and telling me they were perfect. Thank you for seeing me when I could not see myself. Thank you for staying when you could have drifted on. Thank you for building this life with me." Cole shifted so he could look into her eyes, his expression tender. "Emma, there is nowhere else I would rather have been. Nothing else I would rather have done. And no one else I would rather have spent my life with. You are my home, my heart, my everything. You always have been, and you always will be." He leaned in and kissed her, a kiss that held 25 years of love, passion, partnership, and promise. When they broke apart, both were smiling. "To another 25 years?" Emma suggested. "And beyond," Cole agreed, "for as long as we both shall live." They settled back into the blankets, Emma in Cole's arms, and watched the stars wheel overhead. The ranch was quiet around them, peaceful and prosperous. Inside the house and in the homes scattered across their land, their children and grandchildren slept, the next generation of Brennans who would carry on the legacy. Emma thought about how different her life had turned out from what she had imagined that day when her father died, and she stood alone facing an uncertain future. She had thought she would have to be strong alone, to face everything herself, to never show weakness or need. But Cole had taught her that true strength came from partnership, from allowing yourself to be loved and to love in return. He had shown her that her rough hands were not a flaw, but a testament to her courage and capability. He had seen her not as someone who needed to be fixed or changed, but as someone perfect exactly as she was. And in loving him back, in building this life together, Emma had discovered that she was capable of more than she ever imagined. Not just of running a ranch or raising children or building a business, but of opening her heart, of trusting, of being vulnerable and strong at the same time. As she drifted off to sleep under the Wyoming stars, safe in her husband's arms, Emma Brennan smiled. Her hands were still rough, still scarred from decades of hard work, but they were also the hands that had held her children when they were born, that had worked beside her husband to build something lasting, that had created a life full of meaning and love. They were, as Cole had always insisted, perfect. And so was the life they had built together. The years continued their steady march forward, bringing with them the inevitable changes that time always brings. Emma and Cole, now in their 60s, gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operation of the ranch, turning over more responsibility to Samuel and their other children. But they remained active and engaged, offering advice when asked and enjoying the fruits of their decades of labor. The ranch had grown beyond their wildest dreams from those early days. What had started as 200 struggling acres was now over 1,000 acres of prime grazing land, with one of the finest herds in Wyoming. The Brennan name was known and respected throughout the territory and beyond, but more important than any material success was the family they had created, the love that bound them all together. Emma took up writing in her later years, filling journal after journal with stories of the early days, of building the ranch, of raising their children. She wanted her grandchildren and great-grandchildren to know where they came from, to understand the struggles and triumphs that had built the foundation of their family. Cole would often sit with her in the evenings, reading over her shoulder and occasionally correcting a detail or adding a story she had forgotten. "You should write about the day we met," he suggested one evening. "About how beautiful you looked standing on that porch, even though you were trying so hard to look tough and unapproachable." Emma laughed. "I was tough and unapproachable. I had to be." "You were scared and alone," Cole corrected gently. "But you were also the bravest person I had ever met. Still are." Emma reached for his hand, no longer young and smooth, but still strong and familiar. "We were both brave, I think. You, for being willing to stay and build something instead of drifting. Me, for being willing to trust you." "Best decision either of us ever made," Cole said, squeezing her hand. They celebrated their 30th anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The ranch house had been expanded multiple times over the years to accommodate family gatherings, and it was filled to bursting with laughter, music, and love. Emma looked around at all the faces, each one precious, each one a testament to what she and Cole had built together, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. That night, after everyone had left or gone to bed, Cole led Emma out to the porch one more time. It had become their ritual, this time together under the stars, and neither wanted to break it even as they grew older. 30 years, Emma marveled. How did it go by so fast? "I do not know," Cole admitted, "but I would not change a single day of it. Not even the hard times, the drought of '92, the winter Samuel was so sick we thought we would lose him, the year the cattle prices collapsed. Not even those," Cole said firmly, "because we faced them together, and they made us stronger. Every challenge, every hardship, every moment of doubt or fear, we overcame it because we had each other." Emma leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence, as familiar and comforting as her own heartbeat. "You know what I think about sometimes? What would have happened if you had not stopped at the Silver Dollar that day? If you had ridden right through Timber Ridge without hearing, 'I needed help.'" "I think I still would have ended up here," Cole said thoughtfully. "Maybe not that exact day, but somehow, some way. I think we were meant to find each other, Emma. I think our paths were always going to cross." "You have gotten very philosophical in your old age," Emma teased. "And you have gotten more beautiful," Cole countered, making her laugh. "Now I know your eyesight is going. I am 62 years old, with gray hair and wrinkles and hands that look like old leather." Cole took those old leather hands in his and kissed them, one and then the other, just as he had done so many times over the years. "You are still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen, and these hands," he kissed them again, "are still perfect to me." Emma felt tears prick her eyes, emotional in a way she often was these days. "After all these years, you can still make me cry with your sweet words. They are not just words, Emma. They are the truth, as true today as they were 30 years ago, as true as they will be 30 years from now, if we are blessed with that much time." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars and listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch at night. The cattle lowing in the distance, the horses moving in the corral, the wind rustling through the trees Cole had planted when Thomas was born. These were the sounds of home, of a life well lived, of love enduring. "Cole," Emma said after a while. "Yes, my love. I need you to promise me something." He looked at her, his expression suddenly serious. "Anything. Promise me that if something happens to me first, you will not give up. You will keep living, keep finding joy in our children and grandchildren, keep going to church and town meetings and doing all the things that make life worth living. Promise me you will not just sit here mourning." Cole was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Only if you promise me the same thing. If I go first, you have to keep living, Emma. Keep writing your stories. Keep spending time with the family. Keep being the strong, amazing woman you have always been." "I promise," Emma said softly. "Though I hope we do not have to test either promise for a very long time yet." "Agreed," Cole said, pulling her closer. "I plan on growing very, very old with you, Emma Brennan. I want to be that ancient couple sitting on this porch in their 90s, still holding hands and watching the sunset." "That sounds perfect to me," Emma said, and meant it with all her heart. The seasons continued to turn, and Emma and Cole continued to age gracefully, their love a constant in a changing world. Wyoming became a state in 1890, and the Brennan family celebrated along with their neighbors. The wild frontier of their youth was slowly becoming more civilized, with more towns, more laws, more order. Some people mourned the passing of the old ways, but Emma and Cole saw it as progress, as the natural evolution of a place and a people. They watched their grandchildren grow and start families of their own, adding yet another generation to the Brennan legacy. The ranch was now a true dynasty, with multiple family members working different aspects of the operation. Samuel managed the cattle, Thomas oversaw land management, Grace handled the business side, and Rose, when she was not practicing medicine, helped with the family's various charitable endeavors in the community. On a warm summer evening in 1905, as Emma and Cole sat on their porch watching another stunning Wyoming sunset, Emma reflected on how much had changed and how much had stayed the same. They were both in their 70s now, slowed by age but still active and engaged with life. "Do you ever regret it?" Emma asked suddenly. "Giving up your wandering ways to settle down here?" Cole looked at her in surprise. "Not for a single second. Why would you ask that after all these years?" "I just want to make sure you got the life you wanted, that you did not feel trapped or limited by staying in one place." Cole reached for her hand, his grip still firm despite his years. "Emma, I got so much more than I ever dreamed of wanting. I did not know what I was looking for when I was wandering, but the moment I saw you, I knew I had found it. Home, love, purpose, family, everything that makes life worth living. I have seen more beauty in your eyes than I ever saw in all my travels. I have felt more alive in your arms than I ever did riding free. You are my great adventure, Emma. You always have been." Emma felt her eyes fill with tears, as they so often did these days. "And you are mine. Thank you for staying, Cole. Thank you for choosing me, choosing us, choosing this life." "Best choice I ever made," Cole said simply. They sat together as the sun sank below the mountains, painting the sky in those familiar shades of gold and crimson. Their children and grandchildren were scattered across the ranch and beyond, living their own lives, but always connected by the bonds of family and love that Emma and Cole had forged. As darkness fell and the stars began to emerge, Cole helped Emma to her feet, and they walked slowly into the house together, hands still clasped. They had built something enduring here, something that would last long after they were gone. A family, a legacy, but most importantly, a love story for the ages. In the end, that was what mattered most. Not the acres or the cattle or the money in the bank, not even the children and grandchildren, though they were precious beyond measure. What mattered was the love between two people who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen each other every single day for over 30 years, who had built a life together from nothing but determination, hard work, and devotion. Emma and Cole Brennan lived many more years together, eventually becoming the elderly couple on the porch that they had joked about, still holding hands and watching sunsets well into their 80s. When Cole finally passed away peacefully in his sleep, at the age of 84, with Emma holding his hand, he went knowing he had lived a full and blessed life. Emma grieved deeply but kept her promise, continuing to live fully for another 3 years, surrounded by the family they had created, before joining him in the small cemetery on the hill overlooking the ranch. The Brennan Ranch continued to thrive for generations, passed down through the family, a testament to what two people could build together. And in the ranch house, in a place of honor, hung the family portrait from their 10th anniversary, showing Emma and Cole with their young children, both of them with rough, work-worn hands clasped together, both of them smiling with genuine joy and love. Beneath the portrait, in Emma's careful handwriting, was a small plaque that read, "These hands built more than a ranch. They built a life, a family, a love that endures forever. May all who come after remember that true beauty lies not in softness, but in strength, not in perfection, but in perseverance, not in what the world says we should be, but in who we truly are." And so, the story of Emma and Cole Brennan became part of Wyoming history, a love story born in the Wild West, forged in hard work and devotion, and lasting far beyond their mortal years. Their rough hands joined together had indeed built something perfect, not a flawless life without challenges or hardships, but a real life full of love and meaning and purpose. A life that proved that sometimes the most beautiful things come from the most unlikely places, and that true love sees not what is lacking, but what is perfectly, wonderfully there. The ranch still stands today, now a sprawling operation run by the fifth and sixth generations of Brennans, all of them descended from that cowboy who rode onto a struggling homestead in 1878 and the strong woman who took a chance on hiring him. And on warm summer evenings, if you stand on that old porch and watch the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson, you can almost feel their presence still. Two souls who loved each other so completely that their story became legend, a reminder that the greatest adventures are not found in distant lands, but in the hearts of those brave enough to love fully and completely, rough hands and all.